Hello and welcome to Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, the bi-weekly or fortnightly, if you prefer, podcast all around the Microsoft Cloud and related technology, and sometimes about things that are completely unrelated that we just go off on a tangent and discuss. This week, we have got a range of topics from David and Cyrus and myself, including David talking about Azure Network Security Perimeter, Linux or however you want to pronounce that. That's a competing operating system, OS Guard. And Satya had a announcement blog post, I don't know how you want to throw it, where he's reframing Microsoft's mission, and David wants to cover some of that off. Then we'll pass across to Cyrus, who's looking at MS Graph Provider public preview and the Microsoft Terraform VS Code Extension, which I think is interesting considering some of the acquisition-y type stuff that IBM has been up to relatively recently. Then I'm going to round it off with some updates around the Secure Futures Initiative. And I know that I've said about 6 weeks ago that I wasn't going to be looking too much at security. And ever since that, I've done security topics. But I think this is actually relevant because it actually fits more into the sort of consumer client-side architecture and processes. Now, for once, I don't have like a preamble to go through here. So we might actually just dive straight into the projects. Now, that might change as we go through because you know that we tend to do this. So I will pass across to David, who will kick us off with one of those three topics. I'm assuming the Azure Network Security Perimeter updates.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So yeah, as Richard said, three things really caught my eye this week. One's more technical, I suppose. One's more security focused, and as Richard said, one a bit more cultural. So Azure Network Security Perimeter. For that, I guess traditionally, right, cloud networking, I think this might be an outrageous thing to say, actually. But anyway, let's go with it. Has essentially copied the data center. When you think about data center moves, data center exits, right, it's been a lift of shift of technologies, capabilities, and what the cloud needs to do is provide a familiar environment, right, for those workloads. So whether it's you've got firewalls, you've got subnets, you've got the same old walls, even though we purport this whole zero trust thing, right? Essentially, Azure is just another data center in the cloud, right? For many workloads. And I think the advantage here is that the network security perimeter, I'm going to say potentially because I've not had the opportunity to play with it properly yet, sort of flips this. Instead of securing the whole network, you secure the individual resource. So that could be like a database, storage account, an app service, or a group of things, right? So it's no longer, okay, so the network is secure, so my app is secure. It's now my app is secure wherever it runs, which is a bit of a flip and a bit of a change. And I quite like this because then it feels a bit more modular. We can, what was the description I had? Like Lego blocks with invisible force fields. I quite like that. Isn't that cool? But I think on paper, it looks like it's a really good idea. If you look at the architecture diagrams on Microsoft Learn, you've got your ingress. You've then got that ingress coming into a bunch of PaaS services. You can wrap this around all those PaaS services and have absolute control about what goes in and out of those PaaS services. All the PaaS services can talk to each other, right? So that's implicit. But then ingress and egress are absolutely controlled to the nth degree. And you can, there are constraints, of course, in terms of how many things you can have in there and how many rules and all that stuff. But that, and this is my worry, right? Because I'm using old language, because I'm going to say walled garden, right? And that's going back quite a way. But it also gives flexibility in terms of being able to protect and manage those PaaS services, because that's, you know, that's not been desperately easy or straightforward in the past, right? So I don't know. Do you think it simplifies things? Is it just going to shift the complexity somewhere else? I don't know. What do you think?
It's a good question, and I totally agree with the first comment that you made. If I look back at some of the projects I've worked on in the past, now again, you know, as people know, this has not been in the last 2 or 3 years. This is going back a little bit, so they might well have changed the terminology they used. But I'm thinking of 2 projects in particular. One where they actually just referred to their Azure migration as a DC extension. And that is exactly how they treated it. It was just like, hey, we've got a data center over here. We're going to extend that into Microsoft Azure, and we're going to treat it almost exactly the same as we treated that data center, from you know, networking all the way up to the sort of application stack and everything else. And I was working on a project a couple of years ago now where they kept referring it to the third DC. So we got two on-prem DCs, or whatever you want to call it, and then Azure was going to be the third DC. And I'm thinking that's not really the way that you should be thinking about this, because if you take that sort of, I don't know whether this is a thing or not, but certainly in my head it is. If you refer to something as a data center, you're going to treat it like a data center. Exactly. So you're going to go into that mindset with a legacy way of architecting and running that area. And we talked about this in the past, that people are now repatriating workloads back from the cloud because in effect they've treated it like a data center, and that's not the most cost effective or most efficient way of leveraging, in my opinion anyway, workloads in the cloud.
It's step one, right, Richard?
Precisely.
The problem is everyone conveniently forgot all the rest of the steps. So
now, is that going to get pushed off into a different area and become somebody else's problem? I mean, who knows? Organizations tend to be weird and wonderful objects that will do things that you don't expect them to do.
Yeah,
you'll end up probably with some poor network engineer somewhere, or even a security team being told that they have to go and manage all these components, and then it'll just get like a black hole of over here somewhere. Ideally not, because I think it is a very important step that we start to look at how we treat cloud as its own thing, not just an extension of the current stuff that organizations in some instances have been running for 30, 40, 50 years. Because that way lies madness, in my opinion.
I would agree. Cool. Shall I move on? Yeah. All right. The next one was what? It was Linux OS Guard, and it might and Linux. Yeah, it's not Linux. I know it's Linux because his name's Linux. But anyway, Linux. Well, it's Linux, isn't it? But anyway, so if it's Linux, it's Linux, isn't it? Isn't it?
I don't know. I hear like you know that used interchangeably. I've heard someone say the two sort of pronunciations in the same sentence before.
You know, I probably just did.
Well, make up your mind how you're going to pronounce it, let alone anybody else. Anyway,
don't ask me that. I always get this is the wrong pronunciation, so I'm the wrong person to ask.
And I guess it's an interesting thing because people, I think, tend to overlook the fact that Microsoft is one of the largest contributors to the Linux kernel, one of the largest users of Linux in the estate. So many people might not know Microsoft have got their own dedicated Linux OS that they use as part of Azure. So there's a whole bunch of use that goes in there, and they have worked really hard, I think, to be able to give back to the OSS community, right? So a lot of what they do is in-house, obviously, but they do give back quite a lot on that. And I think Linux OS Guard is one of those things. And at its core, it's about verified trust at the OS and container level. So it's a bit like a tamper-proof sort of vault around your system, where, you know, the /user partition is sort of immutable. It's mounted with a signed root hash, and if there's any change, then the kernel goes, no, thank you very much, and rejects it. And it sort of feels very similar to Secure Boot, right? In the way that it's doing it. But I think this adds the ability for it to be more dynamic, and what was I going to say? It uses VTPM. Sorry, that's where I was going. So it uses trusted launch with VTPM to underpin that. So it's still using sort of, you've got to turn Secure Boot on in the OS, whereas historically you potentially turn it off. And the super important, because having that level of security, and I've seen that. I think you can turn Secure Boot on, right? And I think there are different sort of instantiations depending on the flavor of Linux that you have, and I think being able to have this that could potentially be applied to anything, right, is a super useful thing. And as I said, Linux, I think was the last number I read, sort of about 80%, I think, of Microsoft's own AKS workloads are run on Linux, which is substantial, right? And given the intense focus on security, you can see why they're pushing that. And we know this is important because we want to be able to block things like rootkits. We want to be able to block things like runtime tampering. We want to stop things like it's called container escapes. We want to ensure that only trusted code can execute, right? So very, very similar to Windows and Secure Boot. And I'm not sure whether this is controversial. I don't know. But do you think they're sort of making Linux more a first-class citizen? I think they have been for a while, but under the covers. I think people don't necessarily think about it. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I think you're right that. And I don't think they have a choice. I think they have to make it at the same level as Windows within the Azure systems. I think there's so many workloads. Obviously, you mentioned the containerization piece. A lot, that is a big portion of the Linux workloads. But also, you can see that if you can go and quite easily spin up any Linux system, well, I'm not sure about any, but certainly the sort of Red Hats, SUSE, etc. Just as a VM within Azure, really quickly, really easily. I'm sure the stat has changed now, but I'm pretty sure it was something like it's either 40 or 60% of the workloads in Azure are Linux based. So somewhere between that number, I can't remember what it was. So yeah. If that's the case, then you have to make it as secure, as compliant, as reliable, etc. in that instance as you would do your Windows workloads. And I certainly within some of the conversations I have, there is Azure equals Windows sort of mapping, and I think that is something that Microsoft are working hard to change, and it's something that I think other people sort of need to be cognizant of, that it isn't just that level, that that mapping, that it is a much wider ecosystem that you can do within that system.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Cyrus?
No, it's a massive news actually, because there's so many things you can do as a security level in Linux with Azure, and that I've seen something about the Azure Guard, and I was really interested to hear about you now, and it's actually going to the good direction. I'm surprised about the image of Azure equal Microsoft, because we know since 2015 there's almost the majority of the VMs in Azure in Linux. So no, it's a great news. I'm going to dive deep and check more what we can do now, and it links to a subject, so I'm going to talk about that after. But honestly, it's a very good news. I'm surprised there's no more hype about this one too. I'm saying two because my one also didn't receive any hype. I was surprised. Maybe it's the month of August.
It's almost like it's planned, and for everyone listening, they're not planned at all. It's pure happenstance that anything links together in this podcast.
Yeah, August is a weird month, honestly.
Well, I think we certainly probably know why. The wider audience might not know why, but basically because Microsoft's financial year goes June, July, or whatever, or July, June, whatever it is. August is always like everybody's on holiday at Microsoft, so nothing really much happens. It's like January for pretty much every other organization. But it's interesting. Tangent number one, I was looking, so I have a RSS feed set up. I'm sure all of you do as well, about sort of news and updates and everything else. And it was like Copilot, ChatGPT, Copilot. And it's actually quite difficult now to sort of filter out non sort of Copilot or GPT related updates, certainly from the sort of standard RSS feeds. But anyway, enough.
Good. Moving on. So my last topic, and this was, I sort of called it Satya's mission reframing. If you read it, it's not so much a reframing, and I think the article itself is essentially a response to everyone going, why are you getting rid of so many people, right? That's the crux of the article. So, but it's being framed as this Satya's refreshed Microsoft's mission, right? And is framed, as you said at the outset, right, Richard, the why, the what, and the how. And the why hasn't necessarily changed, right? So empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, right? Essentially. And the what, he focuses sort of very much on we're here to build technology platforms and tools, which sounds obvious, but I think there's quite a lot of Microsoft that isn't centered around that. If you look at like their support divisions, if you look at their consulting divisions, there are reams of people in the organization that support the adoption of those technology platforms and tools, right? So I think that was interesting. And then, as we've been saying along, right, there's been a recent pivot, really. And if you really distill it down, it's sort of security, AI. I think if I were to really simplify it down, right, if you want to know what the Microsoft priorities are, AI, security. Now, there's a nuance to that, obviously, and he does talk to that in the article. And, I don't think it's, a lot of these things could be looked at as, I guess, corporate fluff, right? Just stuff being said for the sake of it. But it feels like one of those moments, like when Satya did the hit refresh thing, which was the first big change in Microsoft in terms of culture. I've got my book. I need to put it there. Can you? Oh, there you go. Yeah. So my employee edition of the hit refresh book. It's super interesting, and it feels like they're at that point right now, sort of being reminded what is the North Star, what's the Microsoft North Star, given they're pivoting to an AI platform company. Now, that in light of, and I'm sure we all watch the news, Sam Altman saying, yes, we're in an AI bubble, and there are many people prophesizing that it's about to pop fairly soon. So I think there's the intent of the organization is crystal clear, right? But how much have they bet the farm on this AI bubble not imploding quite yet? And I'd be super interested to hear your thoughts on that, because if the bubble pops right now, you look at all the Copilot investments, everything else, what's there to take its place? And I'm not sure there is anything.
I don't know. If you look at, I have to be very careful what I say here, because I think I'm under an NDA of some description for this. But there's a new term that Microsoft have coined as part of their whatever their modern work, was it State of the Workforce report they did earlier on, which is this frontier firm. I'm sure you guys have heard that term being sort of bandied around, and that is sort of founded on the concept of this sort of AI sort of first organization that is basically pivoting to being AI led, and everything is fundamentally based around some sort of AI system or systems to drive productivity, efficiency, product development, you name it. It's going to be sort of pushed in there. And if that bet is wrong, that is a massive U-turn, because everything now is being pivoted to those wings. You said there's two priorities. One is AI, one is the other security. But technically, Microsoft say there's three strategic priorities for their next year. But I agree. I think if you look at it, and again, I'm going to be talking about security. Cyrus is going to be talking about security. Security is now becoming that second pillar behind AI. But if you take those, I mean, you can't take security out. But if you sort of say, okay, AI hasn't worked, then you're sort of back to the app migration, app modernization, app transformation piece.
Exactly.
But back to the sort of traditional ways of doing it. So, and then you have to pivot your whole organization again to do that.
I agree. This is why space is so important. I think we need to get into space, because that will drive the next generation of jobs, software, everything else, right? So did I do a blog post on this? I did a while ago, but genuinely, I think that has to be the next logical step, because there's only so much, once quantum is at a usable state, and there was a new one, nothing to do with Microsoft, in the Netherlands, I think. Or was it Oxford? No. There's some new quantum computer that's been deployed recently. It might have been in the UK, actually, in one of the universities. And, those things appear to be, incrementally getting towards a usable thing, right? If we can get to a usable thing where you can communicate instantaneously over X distance, then why not? But that's my dream, right? I could ramble on for that hours, so I'm going to stop. But
I think it's interesting, because I now when I did the solo episode, I think I went on a diversion about career paths, because somebody asked me a little while ago, how did you get started in IT? And I looked at actually my journey. Again, not too much personal information, but I actually left with, I didn't go to university. I left with just A levels in the UK, but in politics, sociology, and biology. So three pretty terrible. No, they're not terrible, but they don't really give you a defined career path. So after that, I went, well, what should I do? So I actually did a programming course, C#, C++, Delphi, VB. So not C#, sorry, C++, VB, and everything else. And that got me my step on the sort of career ladder. But if you look at what Microsoft in particular are trying to do, but obviously other people are as well. You mentioned Claude last week, so all of these tools, GPT-5, apparently, the best programming model out there according to some benchmark metric. That path that I took doesn't exist anymore. So how do we take that sort of workforce that is in university or in A levels now in the UK and actually take them on the IT journey? That is I think a challenge, and that's why we have to look at. I mean, space might be a step too far for that, but what are we going to do with them? How are we going to leverage them? The UK is a service economy at the end of the day. That is going to be massively impacted. So again, what is going to happen from that as well? Anyway, that was diversion number 2, sort of.
Thanks already. Carry
on. Cyrus, any thoughts on the Satya piece?
What David said actually is back in my mind since a while now. I think almost a year. This AI bubble and what push a company boards, the CEO to move towards a direction, and now putting almost, it's my feeling, I can be wrong, but all into one direction. I understand what you said, Richard, about the security pillar, but the amount of investment in the AI piece is not only Microsoft. It's even smaller or bigger company, they go all in. So if that eventuality of it's a bubble, and like every bubble, it can expand more and up. That is, we talk about economy collapse, reset. It's kind of really negative, controversial discussion. So it's healthy to think that way and just like see what's the motivation behind, and trust that there's alternatives investment. Honestly, I didn't know about that recent letter. I tried to see every piece of information, but there's always some interpretation. As Richard said too, like a lot of jobs already disappeared. A lot of relevancy is in the AI, so it's not completely a bubble, but maybe maybe what we do around AI can be a bubble. Interested in the security for Microsoft. For IBM is the hybrid world. That's the two I'm personally concerned about, which is really intelligent, because it doesn't matter if you go full in AI, in cloud, we still believe in hybrid mode. We still believe that there will be like a local environment. That's why we discussed last time about sovereign cloud and all investment about Azure local. But it's still, we should have an eye open into that subject all the time, because that's, if it happens, how can we stay relevant, us?
Yeah.
And how will be the investment and what will be the economy in that stage? Because, you know, sorry, it's a borderline. So I'm going to censor myself here.
Yeah. Big difficult questions I won't answer, but you're right. Everyone should be thinking on it at least.
Yeah, critical thinking, just like not even being pessimistic, but what if and what can I do? How can I stay relevant in that fast changing market? You know.
I can't remember who mentioned it now, but the critical thinking piece is really, really important. You did this in one of the earlier pods. I'll see if I can find it and I'll stick it up in the whatever you want to call it. But I'm starting to see, and I'm sure you guys are as well, that all these weird and wonderful. I obviously put David in hysterics, so we'll cover that one off. But we started to see all these news stories about, XY person did this because Copilot told them to go and do it. And I'm not talking about putting glue on pizza here. I'm talking about sort of more serious, perhaps health-related pieces. And if you, and okay, it's not relevant to what we were talking about, but users have to start being critical about what the AI tools are coming back with, because otherwise we're going to be in all sorts of weird and wonderful things. The Darwin Awards might get more interesting, I suppose.
There's also this kind of news. I'm sorry, I know the audience is more American, and I was recently in North America, and there's a lot of news there about someone following ChatGPT advice on health and lacking salt, and now is ending up in a psychologist because he developed a psychologist. So there's a lot of news in the US, and sometimes it's to prepare, because it's the culture to prepare, like, oh, I'm suing you because you give me wrong advice with your OpenAI tool, so I want 10 million. Yeah. So this is a lot of news from that continent. So I'm not blaming them. It's just like it's a cultural thing. Always new stuff brings new this kind of news. But it's true. It's true. We have to be really careful, not just, especially the version 5. If you use ChatGPT, the version 5.
I'm glad you brought that up, Cyrus, because about 20 minutes before I opened the Riverside window, whatever you want to call it, to start the sort of recording and get everybody online, my wife came in and told me, look, what you should be talking about is GPT-5. Now it starts giving me a warning after I asked particular questions, saying, seek medical advice if this, and this. And she was saying that is because of the story that you just mentioned, Cyrus. And I was like, I was trying to frantically find a link to that so that I could be more knowledgeable about it. But it's starting to factor into how those models are created now. So every time you ask a medical question in ChatGPT-5, apparently it now says go and seek medical advice for this particular problem. I'm assuming because of that case with the soul. So anyway, Right. So now that we've had that diversion, which I suppose technically is now number 3, I'm keeping a diversion score, and I'll put it in the website or something. We are going to pass across to Cyrus now, who has got 2 topics. Firstly, the MS Graph Provider public preview, and then Terraform VS Code Extension. So, Cyrus, over to you.
So we discussed about investment, and there was one I particularly looked forward, is the Terraform acquisition. So if you remember, a long time ago, like during COVID, there was a lot of Terraform with AWS, GCP, and Microsoft. And there was rumors, I don't know if you remember, about Microsoft is going to acquire Terraform. And it never happened. And actually, it went stronger with AWS, and Microsoft then developed Bicep.
Mm-hmm.
And I had colleagues now who work directly with Microsoft, inside Microsoft, on developing Bicep and doing less and less Terraform. So Terraform became less relevant if you use Microsoft technologies. And then IBM came, acquired Terraform. Personally, I was happy because I like the language. And yes, there was this kind of stalemate, Microsoft Bicep and everything else Terraform. And no, Microsoft now recently, it was an unexpected news. And I said before, like, I think I will blame August and all this gaming convention you have in August. And I don't know, I try to find any excuse because that news didn't receive the hype sometimes Microsoft community blog gives. You read the comments, there's plenty of comments. Now there was only one comment if you read about, the link is broken or whatever. So I think that's a pretty big news because for just few reasons. One is normally when you use Microsoft technologies, you have Terraform is only for the Azure, which is like the infrastructure. So if you do infrastructure with Microsoft, you can consider Terraform. It's a very good language. And it was not officially developed, the provider, by Microsoft, even though we know it's a lot of employees on the spare time. It's a bit weird because I followed them on the blog and I would try to not digress, but it's not clear if it's fully funded by Microsoft or it's doing on free time. So that was a bit a gray line I never understood. And now with that news, it's not only solving one issue of the providers, but also we discussed about Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph, just to remind, is the single API that lets you manage all the Microsoft 365 and Entra. So everything else that is not infrastructure or overlap infrastructure, for example, security. You have security alerts. You can even do like conditional access, in policies. With Microsoft Graph, you have 2 sorry, I forgot the word, APIs, endpoints. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for. And you have the version 1, which is the production, which is supported, and the beta. With this single API, you can do everything with Microsoft, almost everything. And until now, that was partially supported and poorly supported, in my opinion, with it was called Azure AD Provider in Terraform. And that Azure AD Provider, you don't have the latest features, and it was not. If the feature has an update, you can't really use it. You have to stay in beta, which is not supported, which is not a good loop. So now, that news, literally, I could not believe it. They said we're going to replace the Azure AD Provider to MS Graph supported by Microsoft, and they used that keyword. So that I was already excited. And that keyword was 0-day support. So 0-day, I'm not talking about because my conception of 0-day is the 0-day attack, and it has nothing to do with that. It's a 0-day support, aka if there is a new feature or an update to the MS Graph endpoint, you can it will be directly supported by Terraform. So now you can use Terraform to manage not only the Azure part, which is like the infrastructure, you can manage everything Microsoft. And I mean, it can go really beyond what I said, because every private preview that become public preview features, a lot of question was, can I use the graph to integrate it with our own proprietary technology? On IBM was the same. We have plenty of proprietary technology that are excellent, that supercharge everything Microsoft does. And now with the Graph API, you can manage in code, which can be like version controlled, everything that Microsoft does. This is a big news, and I'm surprised there's not much hype behind that. Probably I'm getting things up, but from what I read, from what I understand, you can now control everything Microsoft on day zero support. That's massive. So you don't have to wait for independent developers, etc. And the next one was the VS Code Terraform extension. I have some notes here, but basically, this I discovered on LinkedIn, and I was a bit surprised when I saw the news. There's an old article that is called, if I get it correctly, Azure Export for Terraform. And you will see that article date from 2023. And basically, it's like you can export some Azure RM, Azure Resource Manager resource you have in Azure and convert it kindly to Terraform. That exists since a while, but now they rebranded and refreshed the extension. Is now called Microsoft Terraform VS Code Extension. So before I go to the hype, this is a write-only extension. It's not going to be like a GitHub, but it's not going to read what you have on your screen. There is IntelliSense to help you, but it's not going to be intelligent enough to replace Copilot or anything else you use. But it's going to generate for you the best practice, the best sample, and being it's not exclusive. It's going to provide more than you expect. So some of the first complaint I've seen is like it gives you a lot, and it's not going to be like a guesswork and try to see what you need. It's going to give you, this is, if you want to use a storage account, this is all you need. And then you can delete what you don't need. So it will help you to write code initially as a greenfield. For brownfield, it's a bit less relevant, but you have IntelliSense now. And also it works with Graph API. So you can use IntelliSense to provide what you need. So it's a move into the good direction, and again unexpected from Microsoft, because that was acquired by IBM recently, and I was afraid that I have to learn Bicep because I personally don't like Bicep. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's I prefer one language and you control everything. I know it's a controversial. I know I have a good ex-colleagues. It's just I think it's because I'm too old now to learn too many new language. Bicep is intelligent. It's like if you know Python, it's a bit the same. It's like a really easy to learn. But I'm biased here. It's just I learned Terraform during COVID. I used to do that a lot. I used to control everything Azure with Terraform, and I just like the concept of one single endpoint, one language. It's not a democracy in my head. Sorry, I'm joking. There was also news I've seen, and that was, like we talk about the alignment of planet, like it's like, again, it was separate news, and they was talking about, it was Azure Local managed with Terraform, and they said, oh, there's a news now, we can create logic networks on Azure Local VMs with Terraform. So I was like, wow, this is like in August, and everyone is vacation. Microsoft released a lot of news with Terraform, which is selfishly exciting for my own use case.
I think we jest about the Bicep Terraform thing, right? But one of the many issues you bump up against is skills portability across clouds, right? And Terraform is a super leveler for that, to enable people to come from AWS or wherever, right, and be able to come into the Azure world. And as long as you have a grasp on some of the services, then you're probably going to be all right. And I was reading as you were describing there, and as a individual that understands Terraform, to be able to go to an existing environment, extract out whatever's in it to give you the Terraform code, you then sort of have that linkage and understanding of how it all hangs together, and then you can be more productive. So I think super useful to know. I hadn't spotted that one, so thank you.
No, I'm happy you said that, because I was trying to censor myself, but actually for multi-cloud is absolutely relevant. And you have the confidence that Microsoft now is not playing like, okay, we will do only Bicep. Now it's clear with that. It's clear that Microsoft is going to invest more into Terraform. And yeah, I think it's, as you said, implicitly mandatory. I'm not sure if I have more to say. I will just digress on like all the security things you can do, etc. I don't need to talk more about that. I was talking about, I was checking with ChatGPT and Copilot. I was checking if you can use AVD, if you can use Windows 365. And yes, most of the graph actually is natively supported. So I'm going to test. I saw some video for now, but I want to test. I have my own stuff. I want to see if it works with Terraform, because that's a game changer.
Excellent. Thank you, Cyrus. And just for sort of balance, I really like Bicep. Haven't done too much in it recently, but I used to use it a reasonable amount, and I actually quite like it. Seems to work with my weird brain. But anyway.
No, it's a simple language. It's honestly a simple language, but
and I do have a simple brain, so it's fine.
No,
it's about choice, Richard. I think having Bicep. I mean, I'm the same. I've always used Bicep. I never really quite got Terraform, to be fair. So,
right. So now that just leaves me. And as I sort of joked early on today, at the beginning of the recording, I'm going to cover some updates to SFI, or Secure Futures Initiative. Now, this is not a new topic. SFI was launched, I suppose it must be close to 2 years ago, but at least a year ago. And for those that don't know, it's basically Microsoft's pivoting to that security first piece. So security by design, security by default. So every service that they release is going to have a security at its heart. And the way that they started to deploy this was almost entirely sort of internally and behind the scenes within the services. So you saw things like administrator accounts had to have some sort of MFA when you're logging in. You didn't have a choice anymore about doing that. And they also did some other things like for those that use the CDX tenants or the customer experience tenancies, you used to be able to have those for a year and renew them. And they basically changed all that, and you can only have them now for 90 days, and then they're dead at the end of it. So quite a wide-ranging sort of approach around security from a service or an internal perspective. So what they've done now is earlier on this month, or possibly end of July, I'm going to have to check the date, and they've launched a series of patterns and practices that are aimed at the consumers of those services, which I think is a really good sort of next step around making the SFI initiative not just an internal Microsoft thing. It's something that everybody can cover off. Start off fairly light. I think there's something like 8 or 9 patterns that range across from sort of I think networking is mentioned in there, David, as well. So that there's a pattern I think in there for some networking components. Data protection, AI, identity, because they are trying to make identity the sort of core pillar for the Secure Futures Initiative. So there's some patterns around my favorite security feature, conditional access, as an example. So it's worth having a look. And this is not, I think, for security professionals. And I think that's something that sort of people see the word security and it goes, oh, yeah, that's the cyber team, or that's going to be the CISO. Actually, no, this is something that I think anybody that's looking to either deploy workloads into Azure, whether that's AI workloads, whether that's traditional sort of data center extension type workloads, as we talked about earlier on today, these patterns and practices should be something that you should look at and apply as and when is necessary. I'm very short and sharp on this one. As I said, there's a number of patterns that are out there. I'll put the link into the show notes and on the screen here, just so you can go and check it out. There was something else that caught my eye when I was running through some of the RSS feeds I mentioned earlier on today. Now, we don't have this deployed in IBM yet in our tenancy. At least I don't think so. David or Cyrus might be able to tell me if I'm talking rubbish on this one. But apparently they've now launched a stop button for Copilot in Teams. So if your prompt is either generating too much information or not the right information, you can actually now click a stop button and it will stop the response even before it's actually started to do the response if you phrased your prompt incorrectly. And it will allow you just not to have to sit and wait for however many seconds it is before you get your response, which I thought was weird and interesting. And I don't know whether I've actually sat there yet and gone, oh, stop. But
so
I did.
So I was going to say, doing the thing I spoke about in our last podcast in Visual Studio Code, I use that a lot because it'll go off. You can see what it's thinking, and you're like, "That's wrong." Right, I have to stop, reframe, get it to go again. There's good and bad to that, right? Because you've already spent the token with the request. So if you're hitting that stop button, stop, all you're doing is generating more and more and more tokens using up whatever allowance you've got. So you have to be mindful around how, what's the phrase? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, but super useful, because you're right, because it will go off on a tangent, and sometimes it is nice just to recognize it and just, I'll spend my time more effectively, not babysitting the thing whilst it tries to work out something that I know is wrong.
Yeah. And whilst we're on Copilot, again, this is now diversion number 4. I have had some very frustrations with the user interface, because if you use / or whatever it is, it actually then goes to look at your file system to upload something into the chat window. So if I'm typing a URL and I do HTTP : / it then pops up a blinking window. So Microsoft, if anybody from the product group is listening to this, please fix that, because it was so frustrating. To start typing a URL, I tend to do a lot of those things if I'm using like a phrase. Instead of saying X or Y, I'll do X/Y, and I do that quite frequently. And as soon as I do that, it pops up a blinking upload window, and like, no, go away. So unlikely that anybody from Microsoft Product Group is listening to this or watching this, but if anybody is, then please fix that problem for me. And I don't know whether they closed down was it called User Voice? There used to be a website
when you make
to go and do
suggestions.
feature suggestions. I can't remember what it was called, but I think they closed it down, didn't they?
I didn't know they closed that down.
You can you still raise a bug? I mean, in the thing that you
in the chat window, you can do like the down thumb and say, "Oi, go and this is."
You wanted the public one. You wanted the public one with the votes, and people can comment on your suggestion to say, "Oh, yeah, that's really bad if they close that."
I could be wrong, so I'll have to double check that before we upload. But yeah, I'm sure I saw that they closed that down a little while ago as well.
User voice pages moving away. Yeah, here you go. It's been so long, the cached link is taking forever to load.
Yeah.
There you go.
So was it called User Voice, or have I just made that?
It was. No,
there was. It's a different thing now. It's a different thing.
Basically saying the feedback web portal, in product experiences, feedback hub, tech community, or the store seems to be
the way to do it.
I think it was a third-party service, and they've obviously
they stopped the partnership, I think.
Yeah. So there you go. So my memory didn't fail me, but there is obviously an alternate mechanism, which is going to be the tech community by the sounds of it. So on that note, we're actually, for once, sort of under the limit that we sort of informally set ourselves for these. I think, unless there's anything from David and Cyrus, we can call this a wrap. And as usual, I've forgotten to do this at the start of the session, which I really should try and get Copilot or the Riverside AI to actually insert this or put some sort of thing that says, do this now. If you liked this episode, please do like it or give it a rating in Spotify, whatever else, or other platform you're in. Follow us to get notifications of when we do drop new episodes, because, hands up with holidays and other issues, we have been a little bit inconsistent over the last couple of weeks. And again, drop us any comments, please do. And any comment that we'll get would be read avidly and incorporated if relevant. So as from me, thank you for listening, and we will catch you in 2 weeks' time. And au revoir.
Au revoir. And just before au revoir, there's you're right about user voice. Since 2021, this was a third-party solution. They moved away from that. So you're completely right. I don't know why recently in my head I had a complaint or something, but they said you can use the website until it's vanished.
Yeah.
Good to know.
See, modern, up-to-date news reporting from me. Something that's 4 years old, but there you go.
It is.
Excellent. And on that note, we will say goodbye again and see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.